Most Christians have never noticed this verse, not because it's hidden, but because no one ever slows down long enough to let it disturb them. Paul says it once. He doesn't explain it. He doesn't defend it. He doesn't soften it. And yet, if he's right, it changes what salvation actually means, because Paul assumes something most modern Christians were never taught.
One of my favorite verses about angels in the New Testament is probably one of the most obscure. And that is in 1 Corinthians 6, where Paul is writing to the Corinthians about yet another problem in the Corinthian church. This time it's taking each other to court over, trivial things, suing each other and whatnot. And Paul just sort of stops and says, look, people, you shouldn't be doing this. You should be able to decide these disputes among yourselves. You're all believers. You're all members of the same family. And he says, don't you know that you're going to judge angels? You could also translate that, don't you know that you're going to rule over angels? And then he just moves on. And it's like, what was that? I mean, where does that idea come from, and what does it mean?
That line should stop you cold. You will judge angels. Paul doesn't say good angels. He doesn't say demons. He just says angels, supernatural beings. So where did Paul get that idea? He didn't invent it. He inherited it. And it only makes sense if you understand how the Bible explains the world after Eden.
Every nation in the Old Testament except for Israel is under the dominion of a hostile supernatural power. This is where we get Daniel's princes over, nations and empires. So if you look at this worldview, the nations are under dominion. They're the ones that are sort of ruling the earth. And then we have the Satan figure who's the god of this world.
This is where the story becomes uncomfortable, because the Bible doesn't describe the nations as neutral. It describes them as administered. After Babel, humanity is scattered and something else happens at the same time. The nations are placed under supernatural rulers, not equals, not partners, but beings meant to govern under God's authority, and they fail. They accept worship. They promote corruption. They produce injustice. So when Paul tells Christians they will judge angels, he's not talking about courtroom drama. He's talking about replacement.
Now, all of that is actually preparatory to this idea of judging angels, because if you move from 1 Corinthians 6, that one line, and then you have this notion of the world under dominion, and then you get to Revelation 2 and Revelation 3, where Jesus himself says to the churches, to him that overcomes, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne and rule. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means we eventually, in the new Eden, are going to rule the nations with Jesus. Well, who rules them now? It's these angels. It's the fallen sons of God. And so when Paul says back in 1 Corinthians 6, don't you people know that you're going to judge angels? It's a reference to the end of days when we displace them. Believers, the meek shall inherit the earth. Okay, believers inherit the earth because of our union with Christ, to whom all authority over heaven and earth is given. That is going to be shared with us. They are going to be swept out of the picture and finally judged, and we become the reconstituted family and council, of God, ruling all the nations of the earth with him, and they're completely out of the picture. So we, in effect, are their judge. We participate in their removal. We displace them. We take their jobs, essentially, and take their place that they forfeited through their rebellion in the heavenly council of God.
This is why this matters. Salvation is not just about forgiveness. It's about restoration. The original plan was never abandoned. It was delayed. Humanity was meant to rule the world with God. That calling was disrupted, delegated, corrupted, and in Christ, it's reclaimed. The story doesn't end with people escaping earth. It ends with authority returning to its rightful heirs. Not angels, not hostile powers, but redeemed humans, united to Christ.
So this adds a whole extra dimension to what we think of as heaven or the final state or sanctification or whatnot, that is directly linked back to this worldview that intimately involves the heavenly host.
Once you see this, you can't unsee it. The Bible isn't just about personal faith. It's about cosmic order, and your destiny was always bigger than you were told.